So I'm going to let Amy kick us off this evening.
Okay. Well, welcome to the new Board Member Academy Session 2. I'm Amy Callan, Director of Operations at the VSBA. For those of you who joined last week, this slide will be a bit of a repeat, but to refresh your memory, and for those of you here the first time, I want to cover a couple of logistics. It's preferred that you keep your cameras on if possible. It's nice to see your faces. There are a couple of ways you can ask questions listed here on the screen. Use whichever you're most comfortable with, the chat box or raising your virtual hand. I just want to note that we might defer your question if it's, you're asking about something that's just about to come up, or if there is something specific to a situation in your district, we may follow up with you directly afterwards or stay online for questions at the end of tonight's session. My phone number is in the red box on the screen. If you have any problems with Zoom or the call, just call me or text me and I'll help you out if I can. The training is being recorded, and we will email you all a link of the video along with a PDF of the slides and any other materials that are mentioned tonight. The recording will then reside on our website under Webinar Archives, which is a locked page on our website. So if you haven't set up your login to gain access to all of the web pages yet, it would be a good idea for you to do that. Instructions on how to do this have been in our weekly update under new member services, or you can reach out to me if you have any questions or problems with it. And finally, there will be a QR code at the end of the session you can use to open up a brief evaluation. We'd appreciate it if you take a few minutes to complete it. It really does help us to improve the training each year, so thanks in advance for doing that. Are there any questions about the logistics?
I don't see any.
Okay, so then let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so again, this is more for the benefit of the folks who weren't here last week. This slide lists some of the reasons why you might want to reach out to me. And if down the road you have a question and you're not sure which staff member you want to direct it to, you're always welcome to reach out to me. I'm happy to help answer your question or to put you in touch with the right person who can help you. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Debbie, who will introduce herself and take it from here.
So for those of us who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the new Board Academy. And for those of you who were here last week, welcome back. My name is Debbie Singizer, and I'm the Director of Board Services at the Vermont School Boards Association. I basically oversee all the professional development of school boards and school board members around the state. Like Amy, I work directly with our members, I answer a lot of questions, and we always welcome members calling us, emailing us with their questions. And in terms of my own school board service, I have served about 10 years on school boards, both overseas and here in the United States, in Vermont specifically. I'm currently serving out a 2-year term on a local school board here in central Vermont, and I'm also currently serving as the chair for that board. So these are some of the things that you might want to contact me for, some of the reasons that you might want to reach out and how I can help you. So to kick us off this evening, and by way of doing some introductions, since we can all see where you're calling in from, what I'd like you to do instead is answer this question, if you don't mind, by putting something in the chat box. So I'm curious to know from each of you if you have yet attended a school board meeting. Hopefully you have by now. And those that were elected back at town meeting day have probably attended at least a couple board meetings, but some of you may have been elected more recently. So the question is, have you attended your first school board meeting? And what is one word or phrase that you would use to describe that experience?
I'm having trouble.
Who's having trouble?
Norma.
Norma, do you know, okay, so do you see a chat box on your screen somewhere?
What is it supposed to look like?
It's probably down at the bottom of your screen. It looks like 2 little speech bubbles and it says chat underneath.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to mouse.
Oh, okay.
down.
Yep. I move my screen and it's there.
Good. Zoom is always moving things around, so you never know where to find things. Yeah, so I'm seeing answers come in, a mix of negative and positive. You all can you all see them too? Yes, you can. I'm sure you can. Yeah, so there's some positives. It was interesting, friendly, eye-opening. Yeah, sometimes people will use the word overwhelming. Heavy, yes, it can be heavy at times. Informative, that's a good. That sounds positive. I like this, Kurt. Non-ironically educational. So you felt like you learned something, huh? Collaborative, that's great. I'd like to hear that. And here's a mixed bag from Kathy from Hartford. It's been uplifting, heavy, and a great sense of pride. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. Robert's rules is tricky, John. It's so that first board meeting can be difficult if you're not familiar with Robert's rules. We will talk about them tonight when we talk about board operations, but it is quite big. It's a big topic. We do have resources that I can point you to on our website that might help you understand Robert's rules better. Yeah, there's a lot of awkward language with Robert's rules. I agree. But you'll get used to it. It's like learning a new language. You do become better at it. Well, good. It seems like nobody is ready to quit, which is good. It seems like there's even some of the more negative comments. People are cautiously hopeful, maybe is the word, that things will get easier, and they will get easier, and they will get better over time as you gain some experience. So here's our agenda for this evening. We got through the preliminaries very quickly, and we're going to jump right into the content in just a second. Like last week, I will be making references to that book that hopefully you all have a copy of, The Essential Work of Vermont School Boards. This is something that we mail out in your welcome packet when you're elected or appointed to your boards. And if you haven't received a packet yet from us, please right now in your chat, in the chat box, type your name and your district so that Amy can make note of that and get a copy to you as quickly as possible. So we will do a quick review of part 1, which was last week. As you may recall, we did 3 of the 6 pillars. So we're going to finish up the pillars tonight, which are 4, 5, and 6. I want to talk a little bit about the district quality standards, which hopefully you've heard about, but if you haven't, that's okay, because that's what the purpose of talking about them tonight is, so that you have some familiarity with them. And then Sue Siglowski will be talking to us about the VSBA and what we do and how we can help you. And I will welcome your questions throughout the session tonight. But if there's something that you want to wait and hold till the end, I'm also willing to stay on for however long is needed to answer questions, especially those that might be more specific to your board or your situation. So that's where we're going. I'm going to do a really quick and brief high-level review. I've heard from a couple of you who are new tonight that you actually watched the recording from last week, so that's fantastic. But for those of you who haven't had that chance, please don't despair. This is a really fast and quick overview. The recording is on our website now, so please go back and watch it when you have a moment. So we started the Academy with an overview of the public education system in Vermont. We started off with a little bit about Vermont education law, how education legislation works in our state, and who the key players are, namely the legislature, the courts, the governor and the state board of education, and the agency of education. And we talked very briefly about what each of these parties do. Then we looked at where school boards fit into the system. We learned that it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that all students receive substantially equal access to a quality education. And yet, the state delegates much of its authority to the local school districts, and that is where school boards enter the picture. Boards govern these local districts, be they a supervisory union, a member district inside that supervisory union, or a supervisory district. And the superintendent is considered the CEO of these local entities. This word local is one that we see a lot in educational governance in Vermont. So we spent a little bit of time on this concept of local control and how the 120 plus different school districts and 56 supervisory unions, how this results in a high degree of local control over education throughout our state. No two school districts or school boards look the same. In fact, there's quite a bit of variation among them, such as the frequency of meetings, the officers that they elect, the committees that they create, if they even have committees. Some boards don't have committees. Even the terms that are used to describe board members and the officers can be different. Board elections are held on different dates. Some are on town meeting day, many are on town meeting day, but many are before or after. And also the way we vote for our budgets and our school board officers differs. Some districts will use the Australian ballot, and others do floor voting. So quite a bit of variation and local control. So moving on to this term, governance. We looked at governance, specifically good governance, and what it looks like and how it differs from management. We learned about the separation or delineation of roles and responsibilities between the board and the superintendent. Governance or steering is the board's work. Management or handling the day-to-day tasks or operations is very much the superintendent's work. This riddle helped us to understand the respective roles of the board and the superintendent. As we know, our job as school board members is to say, hey, we need light. So that is what we call our district's vision. And then once the board says that we need light, it's up to the superintendent to figure out what kind of light is needed. They then delegate the work of installing and replacing the light bulbs to their staff. So in the context of public education, this means that the school board creates the district's vision with, of course, input from the community, and then tasks the superintendent with the how to manage the district while moving towards its vision. Obviously, the superintendent does not do this single-handedly, but has an administrative team that's comprised of principals and administrators to whom they delegate work. So once we understood that the primary role of the board is that of governance and not management, we then asked ourselves, okay, but what does this governance work actually look like? So we drilled down into our different roles. You will see page references on some of the slides that are coming up where you can read more about each of the topics that we'll be covering tonight. And again, I just want to let you know that the book, these are the chapters from the book, but what we're focusing on is that which is highlighted in yellow, effective educational governance. So what is our essential work as school board members? This is where those 6 pillars come in. We can categorize our work into 6 different roles, which you see here. They are all essential and they are equally important to the success of a school district. Last week, we reviewed pillars 1, 2, and 3, engaging the community in establishing a vision, adopting policy, and building a strong board and superintendent partnership. Today, we're going to look at the other 3 on the other side of the slide. So is there any questions about that, about the review before we get started on the new content? Funny, John. John asked, what if the community wants solar as superintendent is installing something else? Yeah. Is that a serious question or is that just a joke?
No, it's playing with your analogy, but I think
Yeah.
it's a serious question. I'm just kind of curious, like, because that scenario can play out in a lot of different ways, potentially.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. So what if the community wants something different from what the superintendent is actually doing, right? So that does happen. And that is really up to the board to communicate the wishes of the community to the superintendent. Now, keeping in mind that it could be a sole community member, right? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's a much bigger group, but it'll be really important, I'd say, for the board to kind of gauge the scope of that, or the how many in the community really want to change the direction that the district is heading in, if that makes sense. We'll talk about this in a little bit, about how it is a good idea for boards to be proactive in checking in with the community on a regular basis, just to make sure that to feel the pulse and make sure that what the district is doing is actually still reflective of the community's values and priorities. But that's a great question.
Thanks. Helpful.
Good. All right. So we're going to start with pillar number 4 tonight, developing a budget and assuring financial oversight. Before becoming a board member, probably as a voter, you paid at least some attention to the school district budget that you were asked to vote on every year. So now that you're a board member, you will have some different responsibilities in terms of your district's budget. Working closely with the superintendent, the board is ultimately responsible for getting the district budget passed every year. Once it's passed or approved by the electorate, the board then provides financial oversight of how the district spends its funds. So we will talk about what this looks like in just a minute, but for now, remember this. The board serves as the link between the community and the school district, and as such, it is the board's job to inform voters about the financial needs of the district and how the budget will meet those needs. Then, once the budget is passed by the voters, the board provides financial oversight to make sure that the money is being used appropriately. This pillar can be one of the more daunting ones for new board members, especially if you are not a numbers person or don't have much financial literacy or competency. The first year of the budget process can be a bit overwhelming, but it does get easier each time you go through the process. I'd say that the key is figuring out what you need to know and what you need to understand as a board member when it comes to budgeting, and also what you really don't need to know or understand in terms of the budgeting process and financial oversight. So if you can recall from that our first session together, there was a slide where it showed an image of a balcony. I think there was like a coffee cup on the railing. It's helpful. I think it can be helpful to keep that image in mind when you start thinking about developing a budget and ensuring financial oversight, because really you don't have to see every single piece of the landscape. You don't have to see every tree, every rock, every cloud in the sky, but you should be able to see the landscape in its entirety. So standing on that balcony above a landscape, you should be able to see the entire forest or the entire ocean or the entire sky, whatever it is that you're looking at. So in terms of educational governance, this translates into the district's vision and its priorities. What is this big picture? What is it that we need to keep our focus on? And that's that higher level vision. So we'll talk about that in just a second by drilling down a little bit. The board provides guidance to the budgeting process and provides a high-level financial oversight on behalf of the taxpayers to ensure that the finances are being managed according to the budget. Let's look at what each of these two roles entails separately. First, let's start with budgeting. So budgeting is an iterative process that goes something like this. The board will set guidelines, or sometimes what we call budget parameters, and shares these with the superintendent. The administration then develops a budget that meets the guidelines or parameters that are set by the board. The board is then responsible for assuring that the final budget will meet the needs of the district, that it's fiscally responsible, and that it is defensible to the community. The board will vote to adopt the budget at one of its meetings, and it then presents this board adopted budget to the voters. Usually this happens during the annual district meeting. The voters then vote on the budget. They'll either approve it or not approve it, but districts must have a district approved budget. This is required by statute. In terms of financial oversight, think about this role as a way to ensure prudent management of resources through financial monitoring. The superintendent will typically provide the financials for the school district in the board meeting packets, at least on a quarterly basis, and hopefully on a more regular, frequent basis on a monthly basis. Some boards will delegate a board member to review and sign orders. This board member is the second signatory on orders, which are, I don't know if you know what orders are, but it's basically an accounting of the checks that were written by the district. The board's ongoing financial monitoring is high level and should focus on whether the district and/or the supervisory union is where they were expected to be in terms of expenditures. Are there any significant variances between what was expected in terms of expenses and what is being spent? And if there are, why? And what is the CEO doing to address this? I just want to say a really quick word about financial audits. Using outside auditors is another way to monitor the finances and the financial systems. Regular financial audits are required. Your board should have a policy that speaks to this. And I'm really not going to go into audits right now, but I do want to tell you that there's more information in the book about how you can read an audit report and what are some of the questions that you might want to ask whoever's presenting the audit report to you. It could be the superintendent or it could be the business manager. Speaking of the business manager, this person is an excellent resource to help explain and teach you about audits, as well as how to read the district financials and how to read the orders. So don't hesitate if you have questions about the budgeting process or the financial oversight to reach out to your business manager. So another type of monitoring that the board is responsible for is this, monitoring progress. As we discussed last week, one of the board's critical roles is making sure that the district is moving towards its vision as defined by the community and that it is on track to meet the goals. So let's see what the monitoring progress actually looks like. As we said before, the board is ultimately accountable to the community to ensure that the district makes reasonable progress in achieving outcomes for students and that the system acts in compliance with all of its policies. So what does this look like? Well, there are different areas that should be monitored on a regular basis. Finances, for example, is what we just spoke about under Pillar 4. Monitoring progress towards goals and vision is something else that we've mentioned before. Monitoring student outcomes and tracking student outcomes over the years to see if you can detect some trends. Adherence to adopted policies, that's another thing that boards should be monitoring. And also the superintendent's performance. And the superintendent's performance is monitored through an annual evaluation because, as you might recall from the first session, the superintendent is the one direct report to the board. Therefore, as the superintendent's supervisor, the board should be doing an annual evaluation of the superintendent. So the superintendent is tasked with providing evidence of progress in each of these different areas to the board at its regular meetings. And how does one present this information? Well, it could come in different ways. It could be in the form of a presentation, or maybe a report, or in the case of policy governance, we call these the monitoring reports. The superintendent may provide the information directly to the board, or they may ask one of their staff members to do it for them. Sometimes you might see the assistant superintendent presenting the report. The curriculum and instruction director might do it, or maybe even one of the building principals. So I could say a lot more about this monitoring role, but this is one of those cases where the role looks different for different boards. How the board monitors the progress that the district is making varies quite a bit in terms of report or presentation format, the timing, the scheduling, the types of evidence that's given. So the best thing I would do as the best thing I would suggest as a new school board member is to really sit down with your board chair and or your superintendent to find out more about how your board monitors the progress. So are there any questions about those first two pillars, the budgeting and fiscal oversight, or the monitoring progress, before we move on to the next pillar? Really quick
Sorry,
overview.
how does it, I'm curious because I'm on a policy governance board.
Yep.
How the two, or all I know is the policy governance, what are the alternatives? What are different ways that boards are accept these reports or have structure, how reporting happens?
It depends, board to board, how formal, how structured it is. Some boards will have a monitoring schedule where they'll be asking for reports at certain months throughout the year. And again, it's really very much a discussion that happens between the board and the superintendent in terms of what kind of reports they'd like to see, the frequency, and the content. I kind of, in my case as a board chair, I leave a lot of those details up to the superintendent, because they have been doing this longer than most of us as board members have been receiving reports. They've been preparing reports longer, so they have a bit more experience. So I really do leave it up to the superintendent to present the reports how they wish to show it. And then, of course, if there's questions or we feel that there wasn't adequate information provided, it's definitely within our purview and our right, even our responsibility, I'd say, to ask for more information or a supplemental report. Another question, Rich.
So actually, Larry had his hand up. I'll just defer to him right first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my question is just like advocacy for a budget, right? So if a budget is proposed by the school board, is it our role to engage with the community to sort of explain the budget, to sort of advocate for it? You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's my question.
Sure. Good question. And this can trip us up sometimes as board members. Yes, our job as a board member when it comes to the budgeting process is presenting the budget to our voters and explaining it to them, answering questions about it, explaining to the community why we believe this is a good budget, a budget that's going to support the district in helping it to achieve its goals, and also how the budget reflects the priorities and the values of the community. So helping really the community to connect the dots, helping the voters to connect the dots between how this budget, this proposed budget, is going to help do those certain things. In terms of advocacy, Sue Siglowski is here, and I do want her to jump in on this because she's our attorney. My understanding is that as a board member, we really shouldn't be out there saying, vote yes for the budget. We are not supposed to be playing that advocacy role, but instead we should be showing and explaining to the voters why we as a board adopted the budget and why we are asking them to approve, for the voters to approve the budget.
Yes, that's right, Debbie. And the board cannot spend money. It can spend money on materials to educate the public about the budget, but it can't spend money on, materials that just say, vote yes for the budget. So that's sort of the line, the legal line.
Mm-hmm. Rich, I think you had your hand up.
Yes. So this is on the area of monitoring. And this, I'm new to, like the rest of us, new to this board. So it's not about this board, but about board governance as I've seen it happen, that we're often captive to the, in our case, the superintendent or the CEO for the information provided. And so thinking about what information we should be looking for in terms of budgeting, in terms of monitoring student outcomes, et cetera. Is that something that VSBA has a templates for or training for? In other words, how do we know to ask the questions we don't know?
That's a good question. Do you have people on your board, Rich, who have been on for a while?
One or two, yeah.
Okay. So I would use them as a resource for sure. And yes, it's something that VSBA can help you with. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what a board is trying to do is really ensure that there is progress being made in terms of student outcomes, academic learning, and wellness, and that the goals that the district has set for itself are being met. So it's kind of an organic process, and this is where that board superintendent relationship comes in to play, that it has to be a conversation between the board and the superintendent about, okay, here are the goals, and we need you to show us evidence of how you are making progress towards these goals. And if you're not making progress, why it is that the progress isn't being made. And so if a board feels like the information they're getting is not adequate, then again, that is your right. And it's actually your responsibility to go back and say, well, I'm not exactly sure if you've demonstrated to me how we're making progress, how you're moving, achieving these goals. So if you need more, ask for more. And trying to remember that you're at this 30,000-foot view, that you don't need to be asking questions or monitoring the minutia, the day-to-day operations of your district. And that's where I think it can get hard. It's easier to say it than to actually do it, because when you're there, it sometimes gets a little bit fuzzy. But this is not a case where you need to know everything. You're not asking for information about, why they chose the color green for the boys' locker room, right? I mean, that's not the type of progress monitoring you want to see. That has more to do with the management. What you're looking for is the district making reasonable progress towards the goals that it has set for itself?
Mm-hmm.
And I would add too, Debbie, that we have, I believe, in our webinar archive, a webinar regarding financial reports. And we had a couple of business managers, I think, on the webinar. This was a couple of years ago at least, but I don't think much has really changed. I think it would still be relevant.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yep. And on that financial monitoring piece, if you've seen the financials, they're quite big. I mean, there's a lot of minutia. There's a lot of spreadsheets. There's a lot of tables. The first time I looked at it, I felt like I was learning a new language. You get better at it and you'll get more comfortable with it. I think what I always look for when I see the monthly financials is there anything that looks unusual? For example, if I know on average we're spending $250,000 a month to meet our expenses, and all of a sudden I see the financials one month go way up, then I'm going to ask why did it increase so much? But I don't feel like I need to understand, and it's really not my job to understand every single line item and keeping track of every single line item. Looking for those big trends, I think, is important. Anything that looks unusual. All right, so let's move on to our last pillar, which is effective and ethical operations. As elected officials, school board members must act with integrity and follow the highest ethical standards. So to present this pillar, I want to welcome back Sue Siglowski, our executive director, who you met last week. And Sue actually joined the VSBA as the director of policy and legislative affairs. So she is a great person to walk us through this pillar. I do want to give you a little bit of a warning that this pillar, effective and ethical operations, is a big one. We could spend a day talking about it. So what Sue is going to focus on tonight is what does an effective meeting look like, and touch a little bit also on board behavior outside of board meetings. So that sets you up, Sue.
Okay, thank you very much, Debbie. And it's great to see everyone back for session 2. So we have a great little cartoon here about running short and effective meetings. And since board work is done almost entirely in meetings, it makes sense that that is where most of the board operations happen. And when your meetings are run effectively and efficiently, your board operations are in good shape, like these people here who are planking. Taking a look at this cartoon, it's a good question to ask: how do we run short meetings and ensure that they are effective? Your meeting agendas and Robert's Rules of Order are really your best tools for doing this. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Robert's Rules of Order are required by law. This is in 16 VSA section 554B. And this means that all boards are expected to use Robert's Rules of Order. Some boards will use Robert's Rules for small boards, which have looser and less formal requirements, and this applies to boards with 10 or fewer members. Meeting agendas help keep a board organized and on task, so agendas are very important. Perhaps your school board has adopted a policy on board meetings, agenda preparation, and distribution. If not, you could take a look at VSBA's model policy on this topic, which is A20 in our model policy manual. And it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with your board's process for preparing agendas, distributing agendas, and ideally, meeting agendas should be developed using the board's annual work plan. We talked a little bit last week about the board's work plan. All meetings must be warned ahead of time, and depending on the type of meeting, whether it's regular, special, or emergency, they have different warning requirements under Vermont's open meeting law. I'll talk a little bit more about the open meeting law in a minute. First, I want to talk just about public comment for a moment. Public comment can be tricky during school board meetings. We get a lot of requests as VSBA staff from school board members for help in navigating public comment, which by law has to be part of every board meeting. As board members, we want to hear from our community members. They entrust us with the work of assuring that the districts are well run. And we as board members are, of course, accountable to them. So we should always welcome them at board meetings. However, while board meetings are public, they are not a meeting of the public. And that is why it is important that your board has well-defined rules for public comment and that you follow them. So please familiarize yourself with your policy on public participation at board meetings. If you have one, it's not a required policy. VSBA has a model policy, A21, on public participation at board meetings. Again, that's in our model policy manual. Effective and ethical operations are crucial and essential to a strong school board. Effective operations are characterized by board members who are clear that they have no legal authority apart from the board, boards that assure that schools are well run but do not try to run them, board members who avoid actual and perceived conflicts of interest, and board members who maintain the confidentiality of executive session. A board meeting is where board work is done. It is a public meeting, but as I said a few minutes ago, not a meeting of the public. An important distinction to note. The dates of regular board meetings are agreed to by the board during its reorganizational meeting in the spring, and meetings are publicly warned and must comply with other provisions in the open meeting law. As we have said, boards are required to use Robert's Rules of Order to conduct their business, and these are hopefully covered during a board member's orientation. And also the VSBA offers trainings on both of these topics and has webinars on them that you can watch, both on open meeting law and on Robert's Rules of Order.
Before we move on, Sue, a question popped up in the chat box that
Oh.
I think fits perfectly right here.
Okay.
Somebody asked, John did, I'd love to learn about policy or procedures regarding public comment. We have a practice of not responding to public comment. I get it as it could prevent a board from accomplishing its work related to the agenda. And sometimes there are public comments that we perhaps should act on. Do you have any guidance for this?
Yes. Well, most boards have sort of their own rules regarding public comment. By law, the chair is allowed to set some parameters around public comment, such as how long each speaker is allowed to speak and those type of things. As far as the board responding, typically it is not recommended for the board to respond to every comment. The chair really handles the public comment piece, and the chair may, the chair has discretion to say, thank you for your comment. They may also say, that's something that that we'll consider putting on a future board agenda. So there's a range of responses that the board chair may have, but it's not really recommended to go into any kind of a lengthy response that is responding in detail to whatever has been said to the board, on the spot. It's much better to have a short response that indicates what, you think your next step might be, or if it's just, in a comment that is about something that's on the agenda that night, then you just thank them for their comment and move on to the next person who would like to make a comment.
And something that can be really helpful, I have found with public comment, is on your actual meeting agenda, you might have a little blurb that talks about public comment. It'll be standard language that is on every warned agenda, and it just informs the public about kind of those parameters that Sue spoke about, that how much time will be given to each speaker, and then and how the topic or the issue that is brought to the attention of the board may be handled, whether it's probably not going to be handled that night, but it could be deferred to the superintendent or brought up at a later board meeting. So just having that text on the agenda is helpful because it aligns the public's expectations with what's actually going to happen during the board meeting. So there's no disappointment or hard feelings.
Yes, that's a great way to handle it.
All right.
So we're moving on to effective and ethical operations, and ethical meetings are lawful meetings. So I want to provide a brief overview of the relevant laws that are all in this book that you see here on the screen. Each district should have the latest edition of the Vermont Education Law Book. And here is a very brief overview of education laws. Title 16 contains all of Vermont's education laws. 16 VSA sections 563 establishes the powers of school boards. So that is a good section of the law to familiarize yourself with. 16 VSA section 554 requires that a school board meeting must be conducted in accordance with Vermont open meeting law and in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, as I mentioned before. Just a very brief note on social media. I think we talked about this a little bit at the very end of the last meeting when we stayed for questions, but I don't know that everyone was still in the meeting. Social media can be tricky, and participation on social media sites can quickly turn into an unintended meeting and thus a violation of the open meeting law. So we recommend that boards have conversations around how to use social media. And we have a resource on our website. It's called a social media reference guide, and it's under the resources tab. And you are welcome to download and use that resource. Public records. As a school board member, you are subject to the Public Records Act in Vermont, and this includes writing or recording an email, a document, a recording of a meeting, a voicemail, or a text. We strongly recommend that you use your school district email for all school board communication to make it easier to comply with a public records request. There is also a resource on our website called Guide to Public Records in Vermont, also located under the resources tab on our website. So that is our last pillar of the 6 pillars. And I'm now going to turn it back to Debbie to summarize the pillars and speak a little bit about district quality standards.
So before I do that, are there any questions related to anything that Sue mentioned about this effective and ethical operations? As I said, it's a big one, a big topic. Open meeting law and Robert's Rules of Order can be the topic of a standalone training that could take up to 2 or 3 hours. So we really just brushed up against it. We didn't do a whole lot. But it's one of those things, as I said at the beginning, where the more meetings you attend, the more comfortable you'll get with Robert's rules and open meeting law. And in the meantime, there are wonderful resources on our website in the form of webinars and those other resources that Sue spoke about that you can refer to. So I see a question popped up while I was talking. So is the Vermont Education Law Book online, Sue?
It is not online, but it is available from the VSBA, and typically a district will order several copies, and sometimes they'll order one for every board member. Sometimes they'll just have them, for the superintendent and a couple people in the central office. It's a book that it doesn't just have Title 16 where all the education laws are. It is a book that endeavors to include all of the laws that could be applicable to school districts. So, for instance, the open meeting law is in Title I, and that is in there as well. And the Public Records Act is also in Title I. And then there's, elections laws that apply to school boards, that those are in there. So there are several different titles of Vermont law that are in the book, but it's not the entire title. It's just the sections that would be applicable to school districts.
Yeah, that was a good question. I didn't even know if it was online or not. John, you have a question.
Before we go to that, I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just thought of something else in relation to the previous question. If you are looking for a specific section of Vermont law, though, you can look that up online. This whole book is not online. Sorry.
Yeah, it's searchable online. Yeah. John, go ahead.
Yeah, Sue, your response to my earlier question was great. Thank you very much. I have like a pretty specific one. I'll just use an example that I think people will relate to. So the last public comment, a member of the community made a recommendation that the board kind of present like a unified statement around H454. And, the chair didn't respond, as that's our practice. 3 to 4 board members thought that was like, oh, wow, like that would actually be a great idea. But we have no mechanism to kind of say like, oh, that would actually be a good idea. Can we put it on the next meeting agenda? Because I know you don't want to derail the current one, but I'm trying to get a little bit more specific.
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that would be helpful for you to know what the process is for developing agendas. And if your board has a policy on that, you would follow the policy. But typically the chair and the superintendent work together to develop the agenda. So as a board member, you can certainly get in touch with the chair and voice your support for that suggestion from the public, and your fellow board members, could do that as well. And it's likely that if the chair hears from a number of board members asking for something to be added, that it would be added into the next agenda. Hopefully that's a helpful information.
Thanks.
Sure.
And Martha asked, is there a new edition of the Vermont Law Education Law book every year? And there is. The one that you're seeing on the screen is quite an old one now. It's 2021. I think the latest edition, is it 2023, Sue?
2024. We do one every
2024.
year. We have to
Right.
wait until the legislative session ends. And then usually it takes several months to get the new book out, because it takes a while for the legislature to get all the acts that have been enacted up on their website and proofread and all of that up on their website. And then we have to go through the process with the publisher of getting the book prepared and proofread and then published.
That's right. Anything else? All right, I'm not seeing anything else, so I think we'll move on.
Oh, I
So
saw a
be-
hand
Sorry, I
from
had
Kyle.
one quick thing, just following
Go
back
ahead.
on the advocacy on the board for budgets. Is that true for does that apply for like personal, like saying, I guess, does it apply for an individual speaking out and like saying you should, how do individuals do it as opposed to speaking for the board, or is that not I don't know. Like we shouldn't be saying vote for this, I guess is what I'm saying. Vote for the
Is it-
budget
I think
as
Debbie
an individual.
summed it up well earlier when she talked about the board explaining the budget and how it supports the goals, and rather than just saying support the budget, you're basically telling people why they should support the budget by explaining it and how it relates to the students in the district and the
Okay.
taxpayers.
And is there, again, is there a law against the advocacy, or is it not just it's best practice? Like,
There's
I'm
not,
not saying
there's-
I'm planning
right.
on doing it, just curious how that.
There's not a law that says school board members can't say vote for the budget. There is a law that says the board can't spend money on materials that the law just allows materials that are educational. It doesn't allow materials that are it's stronger advocacy saying vote for the budget.
It's nebulous. Yeah. Good. So we good? So we've taken a look at each of the 6 pillars, recognizing that we've only looked at them at a very high level and that there's a lot more that could be said about each of them. We could spend an hour on each of them, in fact. But hopefully this presentation of the 6 pillars has given you at least a general sense of the school board's work, and that you can better conceptualize what our governance role looks like. Again, boards don't run the school districts, but we do assure that they are well run. And these pillars are what we do to help assure that our district is well run. I wanted to show you this image because I like it quite a bit. It shows how our work doesn't really have a start or an end point, but rather it is a continuous, it's continuous in a cyclical fashion. And I think it's a great way for us to kind of summarize the 6 pillars. So as you know, we engage with our community to create a vision, which is the why or the purpose of our school district. And then we employ a CEO or the superintendent to take care of the how to manage the district and move it towards the community's vision. We establish policy to set the parameters or the guardrails for how the superintendent and their team manages the district. We adopt a budget to support the vision. And then we monitor the progress that is being made or not made towards that vision. Then we engage the community again to update them on the progress that's being made towards the vision, and perhaps we make adjustments to that vision. So that kind of goes back to the first question of the evening, when what happens if what the district is doing is not aligning with the community's wishes. So that's why it's important to always continuously engage with the community. Boards sometimes can be very good at communicating to the community about certain things, but we sometimes miss that opportunity to really extract or invite information into the boardroom. So it's important that when we think of engagement with the community, we think of it as being two-way, both giving information and also soliciting and receiving information from the community in terms of what their wishes are. So just as a reminder, you can learn more about each of these pillars in the book. And also, I don't think I've mentioned it to you yet, but on our website, we have a set of toolkits. And one of the toolkits is actually on the essential work of Vermont School Board. So you might find that helpful, especially if you're somebody who likes to look at resources online instead of in hard copy. So are there any questions? Larry, I see a question from you.
Yeah, on the engaging the community, like, is there a mechanism for that? Is there a best practice for that? That seems pretty abstract.
It
Like, I
is.
don't
It
know.
does sound abstract. Yeah, and it's not abstract at all. It's actually very concrete. And I will refer you to the book on ways that you can engage with the community. Just to give you one example, sometimes a board will organize a community forum. I've seen this happen just ahead of budget season, when we're about to embark on the budget preparation process, and we know maybe for some reason the upcoming budget season is going to be a tough one, and the board is feeling a little apprehensive about it, and they just really want to get back in touch with the community to see what its priorities are, and to kind of ascertain what the values and the priorities of the community are, so that when they start reviewing draft budgets, they'll be able to see if the budget is aligning with the wishes of the community. That's just one way of doing it. There's other ways you can engage with the community. Sometimes people find surveys are helpful. And sometimes having what do they call them? Focus groups, that can be a helpful way to engage with their community. It really depends on what the purpose of the community engagement is. I think once you understand why you're engaging with your community and what you're hoping to get from it, then the how you do it becomes a little bit more apparent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I'm still a little confused about the sort of the vision, because we're creating a vision, right, as a school board, but we're also asking for community input. And it seems sort of like a chicken or the egg sort of situation, right? I mean, if we're coming up with it during the engagement, it would seem to me that we'd be advocating for the budget that we came up with or the vision that we came up with, but we're supposed to educate, right? Which seems semantical, but
So don't forget that the vision of your school district really should be coming from the community. The board's not coming up with the vision statement, that you're getting that information from the community members about what they would like to see, why the district exists and for whom, and then once that is in place, your vision, then it kind of shifts, doesn't it? Your role as a board shifts. So you've been soliciting information, asking for input from your community. You have your vision statement in place, and then it's very much one of communicating that vision to your community at every possible opportunity, so that those who weren't part of the process, weren't interested in the process, or for whatever reason, that they're familiar with this vision. And so there's many ways you can help educate the community about the vision by putting it on, some board members will put it on their email signature. If it's a short vision statement, you can put it on I think we talked about this last time, you can put it on your warned meeting agendas. It should be on your website. It should be easy to find. So in that case, the role of the board is to really very much educate the community about what is the vision of the district. Was there another hand? I thought I saw one. No, maybe I imagined it or went down. So good on the pillars? Great. I want to talk to you a little bit about these governance standards in the district quality standards, because they're coming right up. They're actually starting, they're going to take effect on July 1 of 2025. I'm curious if you could just show me by raising your hand, either on the screen or just your hand through the reaction box. Have you heard about the governance standards or the district quality standards? Anybody? Steve, you have. Good. Anybody else? Emily, you have? All right. Just curious.
Martha raised a hand.
All right. So a few of you have. Well, that's good. Then I'm glad we're going to spend a few minutes on talking about them right now. So back in 2022, the legislature passed Act 127, which is an act relating to improving student equity. Included in this legislation was a requirement of school districts to meet a new set of standards called the District Quality Standards, or DQS is what we often refer them to, because we all love using acronyms in education, don't we? So there are, in fact, 3 different categories of standards. We have the business operations, we have facilities management and safety, and the governance standards. As school board members, we are responsible for implementing the governance standards, or section 113 of the DQS. And I will make sure that we put up with the recording of this webinar or this training, the link to the actual district quality standards. So when you get that document, it'll look just like this. And you'll want to go to page 6, which is where the governance standards begin. So the governance standards are our standards. They will be our work. There are 14 standards, and they're not overly prescriptive, but rather I would say that they are general principles of good governance. They provide guidance for boards on how to focus on the things that matter most in our work. So as I said, these rules will take place on July 1st of 2020, or will take effect on July 1, 2025. And hopefully your boards will start really spending some time on helping you all to become familiar with them. So very quickly, I just want to explain a little bit more what these standards are, because then you'll be able to go back and tell your board members. They are grouped into 3 different areas. The first one, as you see here, is called governance priorities. What is a governance priority? Well, what that means is that it's what does the board deem to be critical areas of focus and progress for the superintendent and the school system. If you look at this language, I won't ask you to read it, but if you just let your eyes kind of glance at it, you hopefully will notice some familiar terms from the pillars that we just went over, such as, quote, community input into the vision and goals. You might also notice the term monitoring in several places, as in regularly monitoring or regularly reviews the progress towards those goals. And in that 4th standard, 113.1.4, it's about evaluating the superintendent's progress toward meeting the agreed upon goals. This superintendent evaluation is one of the main levers that a board has in helping a district meet its goals and make progress towards its vision. So that's the governance priorities. That's the first of the 3 types of governance standards. The second area is called governance protocols. Governance protocols mean what has the board agreed to in terms of how they will do its work together, and also how it will evaluate its own performance in terms of using its protocols. So part of the foundation of good governance is a commitment to agreed upon and written down protocols for how the board does its work. These are often referred to as board operating protocols. Maybe your board has these. And the importance of the board operating protocols is that they can reduce drama, they can help avoid surprises, and help a board hold itself accountable. And then the third category of governance standards is the governance processes. Governance processes means what are the systems and the steps that a board takes to advance its work throughout the year. Effective governance requires predictability for the board, superintendent, staff, students, and the community. When a board's processes are clear, known, and consistently followed, it increases the confidence within the community and more thoughtful engagement among your board colleagues. So for more information about the governance standards, we've done a couple webinars in the last couple of years. 2023, we did one, as well as 2024. That I encourage you to take a look at. I want to let you know that we are awaiting the proficiency scales for the standards, which should be released, we hope, early next month in June. Boards will be asked to self-assess themselves using a 1 to 4 proficiency scale. And we will be asked to do this work probably later in the summer or the fall. And this will be coming out from the Agency of Education. And what I would suggest is just keeping your eye on the weekly update that the VSBA releases so that you can stay up to date on these governance standards. But hopefully your chair and your superintendent will be paying attention to this. Any questions about these governance standards? Yeah, I see a few here.
Kind of more of a process question than a
Sure.
specific question. Did these come out of the VSBA or some related organization or state reps who are on school boards as well? It feels like this aligns with common practices.
Yeah, good question. I didn't go into the backstory to how the standards were created for the sake of time. However, what happened was before my time with the VSBA, the Agency of Education asked, Sue, this is where I need you to step in if I start to say something wrong. The agency asked the VSBA to help them draft the standards. And so the VSBA created a task force that was comprised of board members from around the state. And they spent close to a year researching, discussing, debating what is good governance and what are these best practices. And there is a body of research out there. It's not extensive, but there is good research and more each year about board governance in the context of education. So this task force was the ones that drafted the 14 standards. They sent it back to the AOE, and the AOE made some very small minor edits, but in terms of the substance, they didn't change much. And it's those 14 standards were approved in the summer of 2023 and became rules pretty much unchanged by what was drafted. So rest assured, these did not come from the Agency of Education or somebody who doesn't understand what board governance is. They did come from board members such as yourself. And as you said, they're really not prescriptive, overly prescriptive at all. And in many cases, I think when you see the standards, you'll say, this makes sense. We should be doing this. And if we're not, we really should be doing this. Are there sites that focus on surveys, forms, and other methods of gathering community input? You know what? Yes, there is. We have a little bit of that information, Martha, but I would say there's a lot more out there, and I'm happy to connect with you after this to give you some ideas of resources. The National School Boards Association has some good resources, and I have some books also that I think you could find very helpful. So yes, there are resources out there for how you can do this work. All right. Any other questions before I toss it back to Sue? All right, Sue.
Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about Vermont School Boards Association because we are your association. We're here to support you. And so it would be helpful for you to understand a little bit about the association. Unlike a school board, the Vermont School Boards Association is not a public organization. Rather, we are a not-for-profit organization. We have a board of directors that is responsible for oversight of the association, and the board assures that the VSBA has a clear vision, is fulfilling its mission, and is fiscally sound. The VSBA Board of Directors is comprised of current school board members, just like you, who run for a 2-year term for the VSBA board. For organizational purposes, the state is divided into 11 VSBA regions with 2 representatives on the board from each of the regions. And you can see the regions in the map here. If you're curious to know who your regional reps are, you will find the board members listed by region on our website under the About Us tab. You should receive regular email communications from your regional representatives on time-sensitive topics, such as during School Board Appreciation Month in February, the VSBA resolutions process, or the VSBA Fall Conference. So you should be getting regular emails from your regional representatives, and the VSBA board may be something that you yourself consider doing in the future. We have a great board, and we would love to have some of you join the board when you're ready. If that is something that might be of interest to you, or if you wish to learn more about being elected to and serving on the VSBA, don't hesitate to reach out to any VSBA staff member. Here you can see the VSBA's vision and mission. And in addition, VSBA has 8 core beliefs, which you can find on our website. And I see a hand from Martha.
Yes, I'm hoping you can hear me this time. Can you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, when were the regions developed? Is this something at all recent in line with all the talk of different redistricting of the state, et cetera? Are yours?
No, our regions have been around for a long time, and they're really, they're not developed for any, educational governance purpose. They're really for the purpose of dividing up the state so that we have good representation on our board of directors. So there's 2 school board members from each region on the board, and that's why we have regions. And they were looked at, I would say, maybe about 5 years ago. The board re-examined the regions and did make a few changes to the regions to ensure that there was, they tried to have a good similar distribution of the number of students in each region, which
Was
is a
that
little
pre or
bit
post COVID?
I think it was before COVID that happened.
Thank you.
But we've had regions for probably as long as the organization has existed, which was back in the 1960s. It was formed. All right, I will go on to VSBA is the collective voice for school boards. In terms of what we do for our members, first, we are often called upon by policymakers to provide input on public policy decisions, and staff members and VSBA board members often testify during the legislative process as new laws are being crafted and modified. We also strive to keep our members aware of any public policy activity that affects education. We issue a regular education legislative report during the legislative session and contact all of our members when issues arise and your help is needed. These are called legislative alerts or action alerts. And typically we request an action of our members, such as contacting your elected representatives or senators on a bill that is being considered. Both of those communications come through email, so please make sure you have we have your school board email address, because that is the one that we're going to be using to contact you. And it would be really helpful for you to be receiving our weekly emails, so we need to have your email address to send those to you. In addition to this legislative work that we do, I wanted to show you how the VSBA supports school board members, new ones and veterans alike. So we have you have the ability as members of VSBA to have phone or email or Zoom meeting consultation with a VSBA staff member on any questions that you have regarding your board work. And we have a lot of resources that we can provide to you based on whatever question you are asking us. We can kind of troubleshoot situations with you. We've heard of a lot of different situations, and it might be that your issue is something that's brand new and we've never heard of before, but oftentimes it's something that we have experience with and are able, and we can help you either way. We can help you by providing resources. Sometimes we can help you by referring you to someone else who's better able to answer your question. We also have ongoing training and conferences. We have webinars. In addition to webinars like this, for new members, we have monthly webinars that any school board member who's part of a member board can attend. And we encourage you to register for those webinars, even if you can't attend them live, because by registering, you're going to get an email with a recording of the webinar and all of the materials, and then you can watch it when you have a chance. In the fall, we have our regional meetings, and those are organized by the regions that I just spoke about with that map. And during those regional meetings, you are electing the board members to the VSBA board, your regional representatives to the VSBA board. And also we will typically have an educational component to those meetings, where last year, I believe it was the governance standards that we talked about during the regional meetings. We also hold an annual conference every fall, and that is just an amazing opportunity to connect with school board members from around the state. And it's really beneficial to be able to talk to other school board members about your experience and their experience. And you can learn a lot just by making those connections. And then, of course, we have keynotes and workshops that are all very relevant to your work and educational. We do regular email updates to you, as I spoke about. Those typically will come out on a Tuesday, and we try not to barrage you with emails, so we kind of save up all the information and put it out once a week on Tuesday, unless it's something that is urgent. Our website is quite comprehensive, and it has a lot of resources on it. Debbie spoke about some of those, and we definitely encourage you to make sure that you are able to access all parts of our website. There are certain parts of it that are protected, so you have to make sure that you get complete access. And if you have any questions about how to do that, you can email Amy Callan and she can help you, or call her. She can help you do that, because you want to be able to take a look at things like our negotiations toolkit, our model policy manual. Those type of things are not open to the public. So you want to be able to get into the entire website. We have a lot of services that we offer as to boards that have to do with things like superintendent searches, superintendent evaluations, policy governance, and also anything to do with district consolidation implementation and Vermont education policy. We also have some collective bargaining supports that I mentioned earlier, and those are in our negotiations toolkit. And finally, we have two publications, which are the Vermont Education Law Book, which we talked about earlier, and our Essential Work of Vermont School Boards and our member newsletters, which we will typically do one member newsletter per year. And then we also have another one that we send out that's more of a guide to our services. So that sums up all the different supports that VSBA gives for school boards and school board members. And I would definitely encourage you to give us a call or send us an email if you ever have any questions or need any information. We're always happy to talk with you. And I'll go on to our staff now. You have met 3 of us there. We have a 4-member staff, and you heard last week about what each of us do. The one staff that you did not get to meet is Sandra Cameron. Sandra is our Associate Executive Director, and she works on superintendent evaluations, superintendent searches, the VSBA model policies, and educational equity. This is an extremely hardworking team of 4 ready to provide you with the services that I just spoke about. VSBA, as we mentioned, is a membership organization, which means our primary job is to serve you, our members, and to support you on your learning journey so that you can become the most effective school board members possible. We look forward to continuing to get to know each of you after tonight, when the new member academy concludes in a few minutes. Please don't hesitate to reach out at any time with any questions or issue. And I am going to hand it back to Debbie to close us out for the evening.
Great. Thanks, Sue. Are there any questions related to what the VSBA does, the board or the staff, and how we can help you? All right, seeing none, I am going to close us out because I'm aware that we are right up to the 7:30 hour. I wanted to ask you one question before we go. And if you don't mind putting this, have a think about it and then put it in the chat box. I'm curious to know, what is one thing that you plan to do to continue your learning as a new board member? I mean, this is really just the beginning. For many of you, maybe it's not. Maybe some of you have had some training and orientation from your own board, which I hope is the case. That's something that we do encourage boards to do, is onboard their new members. But we threw a lot of information at you tonight and last week, and I know that this learning is continuous. I always say to school boards that no matter how many years I serve as a school board member, there's always something I don't know. It's a continuous learning process. So what is something that you think you might want to do to continue your learning as a new board member? And then I have a question for you about a way we can help you and whether you'd be interested in this.
Is this a discussion? Are you asking that for us to answer you right now? Or is that just something for us to think about as we leave?
If you could put it in the chat, that would be
okay. Sorry,
great. No worries at all. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to share some of them because they are good. So I'd like to continue to learn from the more experienced board members. Yep, that's always a good way to learn, Kurt. Definitely reach out to the members on your board who have been around for a while. Some boards, we do ask boards to consider doing a mentorship program where they match an experienced board member with a new board member for up to a year, just to sit next to them at board meetings and help guide them along. Meet with them after a meeting is over to see if they have any questions. You could see if that's something that's interesting to you, you could ask your chair to be assigned a mentor. Review the materials that I have in a pile labeled review. Good. That's a good one, Ginger. I plan to learn more about budget and financial planning. Great. Emily, if you need any help with resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. If you read the Essential Work for School Boards and you want more, let us know. Asking questions is a great way to learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a great, it's an easy way to learn, and hopefully there aren't any boards out there that would dissuade you from asking questions. Deep diving on recent trends in education policy. That's a heavy one, but a worthwhile doing, Kyle. That would be great. Again, reach out if you need help finding resources. There's not one thing, but I will finally get to reading through Essential Work of Vermont School Boards and look through the VSBA website. Great, Rich, that will take you a bit of time, so don't try to do it all in one sitting. Pace yourself. I tried to read the Essential Work of Vermont School Boards cover to cover and didn't manage. I have to go back and use it more as a resource so that if I have a question, I can look up my question in it. Use the toolkit. Absolutely. We have other toolkits on our website that we mentioned. There's the negotiations toolkit. There's a superintendent evaluation toolkit. There's a whole bunch of toolkits on our website that you can take a look at. Learn about assessing student outcomes. Yep. And if you need some help with that, Steve, I would suggest you talk to the superintendent. That's a good resource for learning more about how to assess student outcomes. That's their business. That's what they've been doing. They're a good resource. Mentorship can be very useful. It can be. We do that on our board, and I think it works really well because it's somebody that you can trust and confide in. And if you know that there's going to be somebody who waits after the board meeting for you that you can ask a question of without feeling like you're taking up too much time in the board during the board meeting, I think it's a wonderful way to help a new board member understand what happened at the board meeting. I would like to have training for Robert's Rules of Order. Absolutely. We do offer a training on those topics. It's a customized board development service that we offer. That's one possibility, Jen, but also there are recorded webinars, at least on Robert's Rules of Order. And we do have an open meeting law cheat sheet on our website, which kind of gives you the very basics of open meeting law, especially things like how do you go into executive session and things like that.
And another resource I would mention is the Secretary of State's office has a training video on open meeting law, and we could include that in the resources here. Chairs are actually required to do that training, but it's really important for all board members to understand the open meeting law.
Yeah, we can, that presentation by the Secretary of State is on our website, but it can be tricky to find. So I'm going to make sure that that's included as a handout that goes along with this recording. Exploring community engagement. Yep, that's a good one. Again, if you need some more resources beyond what you're finding on our website or in the book, let me know. I can direct you. We just talked about offering Robert's Rules of Order and open meeting law training for boards. Policy governance. Yeah, Martha, you and I were on that journey together, learning more about policy governance. I will touch base with you after this meeting. Maybe you could send me an email. So, but we are, Jeannie Collins and I are meeting tomorrow to talk about plans for the summer and going into the new school year of how we can support policy governance boards. So stay tuned for that. Outside of public meeting laws, can we meet with experienced board members to learn more to fill the gaps we have? Absolutely. I think what you're asking maybe, Rich, is are you worried about violating open meeting law?
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, I don't know how many members it would, but if I'm meeting with somebody and we're talking about, you know, the gaps in this, and the conversation naturally leads to just some of the work we're doing, are we violating open meeting laws? If it's just two of us, if it's three, what happens if it's three? What, you know, what is it we need to be careful of? What are the likely pitfalls in having a mentor who's also a board member?
Just be aware of quorum and what number it takes on your board to have quorum. But if it's usually two is very rarely a quorum. So one-on-one conversations, I think, are fine.
So anything below quorum is permissible?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, all right.
As long, and obviously best practices when you're meeting, you're really keeping tight to what you're meeting about, and that is the work of the school board and how you do your role. You're not going to be jumping into discussing actual actual issues or board business, but really you're focusing more on the professional development aspects. And then somebody said exploring the VSBA website. Those are all great ways to do it. I have a question for all of you. Martha, you have something. Go ahead. Maybe you're having trouble with the audio again. Your hand's up, but I can't hear you. Why don't you go ahead and put it in the chat box? In the meantime, I wanted to ask the group. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm wanting to know, is there anything that would, how could the board be able to mix with the new members in a way that kind of gives them a sense of, these are some of the things that I've done that I'm strong in. And if you needed to learn from me, these are some things I have to offer. How could something like that be done in a way that would not violate open meeting laws?
Well, you could talk to your board chair about getting that onto a meeting agenda, sometime soon, and say, could we have a discussion about this? And that way it's warned and you can all talk about it at that board meeting. There's no problem with it there. That's how I think I would do it. I mean, it's a helpful exercise, and it's worth doing.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. So my question for the group is, in the past, after we've concluded the new member academy, what we've done is we've launched a new member forum, which is basically a online group. It's an opportunity for this group and any new board member who wishes to join to come together online over Zoom once a month, just as a way to ask questions of each other, ask questions of the VSBA, share some experiences, just kind of use each other as sounding boards. It's a safe environment. It might be because we're all new to our role. Hopefully you would feel very comfortable in asking questions.
And it's not recorded, right?
It's not recorded. We would ask you to register, and I do a forum for chairs and vice chairs. And what happens is when you register for the forum, I just ask if there's any topics or questions that you would like to cover, so that I'm a little prepared ahead of time to deal with those, address those issues. Is this something that you might want to do as a group? We've tried it in the past and it died off very quickly. And I think it's just because people are so busy. But if you want to give it a try, when you do your survey, which I'll put up the QR code in just a second and the link that'll take you to the survey, I put in 2 questions about this idea. First, if you're interested in having an online forum for new members, and if you are, what evening of the week would work best for you? Anybody wants to share anything about that right now? Thumbs up, thumbs down kind of thing, if this would be helpful. Thumbs down, Emily. She's overwhelmed. Not one more. That's totally fair.
Honestly, I feel like I'm going to learn more from the local members that understand our governance and who I am familiar with. I'm not likely to engage with folks outside of the area that I don't really know. And Larry asks plenty of good questions in our board meetings for me to learn.
Awesome. Keep it up, Larry.
I would say if it could be async, like not like I don't know, Slack and Discord in my world, but I don't know what platform we could do that's not an hour at a time is not going to happen, but checking an email list is easier, or something like that, perhaps.
Okay. All right. Well, just answer that question if you don't mind on the survey. I want to put up that survey. Here's information about the next webinar that we're having in June 10th at 12 p.m. It's going to be about, hopefully, the legislature will be done, and we'll have a little readout on what happened on during this year. But here's the evaluation QR code and the link up here. And if you could do that, that would be much appreciated. And we And as I said, one of those questions would be if you'd like to be part of a new member forum, we're happy to launch one, probably not for another month, but wanting to see if there's interest or not. And if there's not, and we don't have a forum, I still want to invite you always to reach out to the VSBA with any questions or ways that we can help you. So thank you all for joining us. And I will stay on a few minutes longer. If there's anything that anybody wants to ask, I'm happy to stay. And if you need to go, which I think many of you do, good night and have a good evening.